Sonic Boom Episode 28, Nut Work. We start out seeing Styx brush her teeth and gargle and spit. Then she thinks someone's stealing all the water to sell it back to her when she's out of water. And she doesn't just say it's Eggman's immediately, since that's the only person who could be doing that. The comedy chimp has a stand-up routine about how the water's running out, and he jokes that it's being rerouted to Eggman's bathtub. The heroes surprisingly laugh at this because the writer thinks it's hilarious, instead of assuming he's right, like genre-savvy people. And Styx asks why they didn't talk about the water crisis when all the news did was tell them the mayor was opening a new scissors factory. She does have a point. Why is this the only thing being focused on? And it doesn't strike me as believable that there would be an entire factory just dedicated to scissors. She surprisingly shows up at the mayor's house and tells him off. She's gutsy. She's right. Why aren't they focused on the water crisis? That's completely unrealistic of the news to do. She's so wrong genre savvy though. She just assumes the government is pure evil when she doesn't live in a tyrannical dictatorship. Her village is really peaceful and free. She can only convince a journalist to do an investigation on such an important thing because he could get an award. Why? And even then he wants to finish his sandwich. She gets rightfully angry when instead he just does a fluff piece on puppies licking the mayor for some reason. I sympathize with her here. I felt sorry for her when she became the town crier to try to tell people what she wants. Why doesn't she do this normally? It would be in character for her. She says technology is her enemy, and yet she's friends with Tails and isn't constantly yelling at him, so that's nice of her. And why is Tails singing about her loving technology like a cheerleader girl? Anyway, she has a radio show. That was fast. And insists she'll bring them the truth. I guess Tails built her stuff. She's entertaining and compelling as a speaker here. She's a good public speaker, aside from saying delusional things. She wonders if Eggman's to blame for the water crisis. Good, I thought she was just gonna blame the government forever. I hate that Sonic broke the fourth wall. Sure, it's true that Eggman's plans aren't motivated in the show, but that line still sucked. Because if the writer knows this, they should fix the problem. Styx and Tails jump out of an airplane, and they record it so Styx can tell people that she jumped out of an airplane to prove she's not crazy. I like that moment. And she's not the only one who jumped out of the airplane. So, she then busts Eggman for having an evil plan related to water. And he lampshades that he used a water siphoning scheme to make millions. I'm really glad the writer was smart enough to make Eggman actually responsible for this. Why did she scream that people should not listen to her when she has a radio show? She fits this role perfectly. People recognize that she's right. I hate that the first guy said he didn't think Eggman was guilty at first. Everyone would. Then Dixon from a network offers Styx her own TV show because she's good for ratings. Styx is apprehensive at first because he's the man. She'd fit perfectly in the 60s. Tails of all people tells her that sometimes she has to compromise her principles to get the truth out. But she already did. She interviews the mayor to try to see if he knew about the water crisis, and all he does is say that he doesn't feel well because he ate too much corn, and he runs out of the room. Seriously, why is Tails encouraging a conspiracy theorist to get her own show? That's stupid. I actually giggled when Dixon says cheerfully that she made the mayor look like a fool and destroyed faith in the government. It was funny because he was somehow happy about that and complimenting her. A lot of time is wasted because Styx doesn't want to be ordered around, and she's talked into it anyways. She shows a happy story where puppies lick the mayor, and she complains about debasing herself with a happy story later. This story is stupid. The only good thing about this is that Styx is the main character for once. Then she agrees to show off some guilt-tripping villager crush under something. But then she can't stand compromising her principles anymore. Why was that compromising her principles? She wanted to do depressing stories. Oh right, because she was being ordered around. She's a news reporter. News reporters don't get to decide which stories they report on, do they? Then she tells people to fight the power, and somehow they agree and run around screaming with weapons. Well, I thought the whole appeal of her getting her own show would be that she would be the only one in charge. Why would they think she would agree to anything else? Sonic tells them to chill, and they do, because he's the hero of the world. So now they respect him? Eggman then shows up with a water vaporizer that somehow needs to be hovering over the ocean to work, and it's using microwaves. Sonic thinks this is the worst conceived plan yet, and Eggman wants the water to be privatized for himself. Then some civilians destroy the machine with their tools, making me smile. even if we should have just had Eggman succeed for once. I even liked the song saying, "Fight the machine." That was cool. We even saw one of them fight the machine. He must have great teeth since that didn't destroy his teeth and hurt him. Well, Knuckles has super strength. Why can't other random Mobians have magic powers too? Like that cop who was strong enough to drag away Eggman's rocket with a bike earlier. It would make a lot less sense if Sonic's friends were the only ones in the entire planet who had special powers for no reason. It would make more sense if there were plenty of people with special powers. Eggman actually lampshades that he should have built the machine better. Naturally, how would he not make it out of super strong materials by this point? And Six quits because she's sick of being ordered around, which she would have done immediately. I'd find Six to be a great character in practice if every episode had her like this. She's being an actual person, not just someone to say delusional things for a few seconds and not do anything all episode. An episode like this reminded me why I really liked her in the comic. Well, at first she blames the water crisis on something nonsensical out of nowhere. Eventually she realizes it's Eggman, after somehow deluding herself into thinking the incompetent mayor is covering it up. To be fair, it could happen if the mayor found out and Eggman bribed or threatened him into keeping quiet. She would naturally fit really well into the role of a conspiracy theorist radio host. But obviously someone like that shouldn't have any influence over people, as we see here, because she convinces people to start rioting. All with a vague message to fight the man, when it's not like she lives in a really oppressive dictatorship. We could have easily had that rioting scene with the whole plot being about her staying with her radio show, which I thought would be the case, because that would make sense. She's so wrong genre savvy. She would fit perfectly in Sad AM or Archie rebelling against Eggman. Where's this coming from? What's the government done to her? We're missing a backstory here. This kind of hatred of the government would make way more sense for Shadow, though even then it was really the military bothered him, not the actual government. My point is, Styx would make much more sense if we were told that the government did something to her to earn her obsessive paranoia of it. But then it'd make her tragic, so that'd be too dark and edgy for this. Oh wait, she's schizophrenic! She's already tragic and dark and edgy. So why don't they explain how the government screwed her over? Like, maybe she got booted from her wild jungle village because the government bulldozed it to make a shopping mall. And that's why she's with Sonic now and hates the government. Because normally jungle dwellers are about, well, one, staying in the jungle, and two, might makes right, and thus would blindly obey the town chief, not oppose him. I could actually enjoy her passion here. For once, instead of just being someone to say delusional things and do nothing, she actually gets to do a whole bunch of stuff in the plot. And she's not just looking ridiculous because she's actually right. I love that. Her being right sometimes makes her relatable. For once, she has a deeper personality. She's not just about saying crazy things. She's also independent and stubborn. So her gimmick stems from being independent and stubborn, which is a more broad personality trait. She's about rebelling and hates being told what to do. Good thing she's got morality then instead of being a criminal, because that could easily be the result. Rebelling against the government could involve being a criminal. That's the kind of message Scourge would love. While I wish her voice wasn't as grating, it was nice to see an episode where she was the focus, and it worked. It instantly made her a sympathetic and interesting character, and I could really enjoy and live vicariously through her passion. Because this time her paranoidly jumping to conclusions makes her do something. That's when it goes from a confusing, unfunny joke to actually interesting. I even liked Eggman's plan the episode. He always wants control over something, so he tries to threaten the water supply. It's a very threatening plan if you think about it, and creative, and it was awesome to see the civilians destroy the machine, being motivated to take action as heroes because of Styx. Logically, you'd think he would have had his machine shoot lasers automatically and be made of carbon nanotubes though, because he built his robots to fight Sonic, someone who can spin dash through stuff at Sonic speed. I would have rather seen an actual action scene instead of an overly quick anticlimax in 5 seconds. But it was nice to be reminded of the heroic citizens of Furville. Even if them ever being motivated and influenced by Styx, the town nutjob was forced as hell. Sure, she's a hero and was right about Eggman, but logically she should have just been saying what everyone was already thinking. Why wouldn't Eggman be blamed for everything big? But I totally get why they'd want to hire her as a reporter, because the amount of passion she has is very entertaining to see. but they should know she'd only have passion if she's doing what she wants. She's very lucky she didn't actually make a fool out of herself in front of a large audience. But I think she couldn't do any more damage to her reputation. I think everyone who knows Styx exists would already know what she's like, and the only people who would believe her conspiracies are the ones with the same disorder as her anyways. So they would have believed in a different conspiracy without her. At least we didn't see her talk about genuinely wrong conspiracy theories of hers, and actually get some people to believe her, because that would have been really insulting. But we could have easily had that happen, and we should have at least once to take advantage of what her character actually is, instead of her confusingly doing stuff on stories and stuff she doesn't want, like any reporter. You could have the story with anybody. This isn't a story taking advantage of who Styx is. What's confusing is, why was she hired as a news reporter instead of actually getting a show like her radio show where she gets to talk about what she wants? Having a pirate radio show isn't the same thing as being a TV reporter. Her radio show was more about her talking about any theory she happened to have. She was lucky this truth was true, and that she was actually able to go out and investigate. Most of the time she wouldn't do that, so she wasn't really a journalist. I was expecting something more like that episode of Malcolm in the Middle where Hal was a crazy radio show host talking about government conspiracies. But instead of the plot continuing with that, suddenly she's hired to be a reporter when I thought they were going to give her TV exposure for her radio show instead, as a natural continuation of what she was doing earlier. That was a missed opportunity. What's the point if it's not Styx being herself, and instead being a regular reporter? It was just such a lame excuse to go back to the status quo really quickly. Well, they were smart by restraining someone like her, instead of making a fool out of her letting her preach misinformation for a show. They should have known she quit, though. They were lucky she ever agreed to do what they said when they didn't exactly threaten to fire her. Since when does the news think it needs happy fluff pieces for ratings? Isn't American news all about bad news specifically to game the ratings? More importantly, it's completely unrealistic that it just be the same exact story as before, but with Styx presenting it this time. But this does help world build by showing another way that Mobius is a bit better than our world. Their news forces people to have good news as well as bad news, on a basically equal rate. I wish news worked like that in real life. Sonic Boom episode 28-2. Alone again, unnaturally. We start out with Sonic waking up lying on some bricks in pain, and he wonders what happened, deflating the tension by snarking that he felt worse from a bad comedian act he saw. He wonders why he's dressed like this, and remembers Amy's poetry slam, because of course she likes another girly hobby. And he runs to 2 different houses to see where his friends are. Nobody's at Madburger either. He then says that makes sense, and it took me until the next scene to get the joke and almost laugh, because we always see people at Madburger, even if it's just his friends and him. Although, I only remember seeing Sonic and his friends at Madburger, not anyone else. But if that literally was the case, Madburger would have gone out of business, and he had a whole bunch of people easily in Shay Amy. Then we see flashbacks where we learn that Tails had been putting Sonic through dangerous experiments, which involved him being smacked into a stone wall. And somehow Amy isn't really worried about his well-being, and is only mad he scuffed her skates. That's OC. Sonic is made to run on a conveyor belt, and he runs so fast that he gets slid backwards and hurts himself. Tails admits humbly that his speed experiments were inconclusive. Tails says happily that no pain means no gain, and Sonic lampshades his lack of compassion. So if the writer thought to lampshade this, he shouldn't have written it this way. He's covered in bandages. How are his friends not betraying him by treating him like this? Tails even said he had broken ribs. The Tails I know would feel horribly guilty and stop after Sonic got hurt even once. I found this kind of speed experiment weird when Uncle Chuck did in Archie, and at least there, Sonic wasn't getting hurt. It makes sense that Tails would be the curious scientist about his speed, but then what the hell took him so long? This would be the first episode. Come to think of it, I hate that we aren't told how long they've been fighting Eggman. Earlier on, the mayor said that they saved the village for the millionth time, but of course there's 365 days in a year, and yeah, Eggman would have to threaten the village a ridiculous amount of times. They probably have to be fighting him in the womb for that to make sense. And I haven't even done the math. We should have been told how old they were when they started freedom fighting. Tails says his control panel will make Sonic faster with less processing, and Six lampshades blast processing, which is a buzzword, and Knuckles is simple enough to get excited over it. Portraying the kids who are attracted to this franchise by the expert American marketing as just as dumb as Boom Knuckles is actually pretty inconsiderate and demeaning to the fan base. The kids had no reason not to get excited. Those kids became the majority of longtime Sonic fans that are watching the show right now, and the Genesis was technically more powerful, so it wasn't really lying. The franchise has fallen so far since then that it's completely out of touch with what made it successful to the point where it mocked the exact kind of marketing. Talk about ungrateful. I didn't appreciate this kind of fourth wall breaking joke. Why would Six say this in-universe? Sonic somehow happily agrees to do what he wants after complaining about all he was put through this morning, making us expect him to refuse to do another experiment, and like even a fanfiction would write. Well, since he enjoys boosting later, it does make sense that he'd see this as a reward, but he just was told that it wouldn't fix his broken ribs. And yet it clearly has to have fixed them because he doesn't spend the rest of the episode in horrible pain. Also, if he really had broken ribs, wouldn't he be struggling to even walk or stand up and want an ice pack constantly? Even a fanfiction I read was more realistic about this injury. Somehow he's magically healed from all injuries just because he's made to boost when Tails just said the device wasn't about that. So how could that be an unintentional side effect? The machine's chaos energy just decided to help him out of his predicament on a whim, apparently. Why couldn't the heroes have just given him a bunch of rings? Somehow I didn't notice this plot hole at first, and maybe that's because when he started running super fast, he was surrounded by a blue aura, and I guess I instinctively thought of it as the kind of magic that healed him, because he was put in his natural state that you'd always expect Sonic to be at, which distracted me from the state he was in before from sheer excitement. He'd have to have been healed. It would have made sense if they bothered to not have him still injured at this point, and instead time skip to him being healed after he says he wants to take a break from experiments. He enjoys boosting through the canyon, being as fast as the game Sonic is nowadays, which goes to show you how lame Boom Sonic is most of the time by comparison if this is somehow new and thrilling to him. I'd expect him to always be this fast, to begin with, or else how is his name Sonic? Thank God this show's remembering that Sonic is about being a thrill seeker who loves being speedy, and not about sleeping and complaining about fighting Eggman all the time. This is the most Sonic-like he's ever been this show. He jumps over a chasm, and he creeped me out when he told him to make him faster, and some fire went in front of him. Then he creates some after images of himself, like Archie Sonic. Well, Archie Sonic did run around a whole planet multiple different times in more than one issue, so he is the fastest Sonic. No wonder he imitates him at his greatest potential for speed. And then he goes so crazy with speed that he runs into a wall after a while, and somehow doesn't die. But Sonic in the present day somehow doesn't get what happened to him after remembering all that. Sure, he wouldn't remember what exactly happened, because hitting your head makes you lose your memories of what knocked you out, but it's still obvious. Knuckles is somehow only mildly annoyed at Tails when he says that he disintegrated Sonic, just saying that it's not cool. And Tails takes a painfully long time to kinda explain what's going on with Sonic. But we only learn what's going on when Sonic starts throwing stuff in Eggman's base. Naturally, he screams and hides behind a sofa, saying he's a man of science. Then he immediately believes and goes anyways, and says it's a good thing he downloaded a ghost hunting app into his gauntlet that somehow existed. Good thing Sonic doesn't actually feel bad about trashing the place. Why doesn't Sonic do this every day? He can go to Eggman's house whenever he wants. I love that this is basically a story about Sonic being trapped in super fast speed, like in Sonic the Comic. Only we finally got to see a fully fledged TV episode about it. We get to see it in motion, though it's only an 11-minute short, so it's still too short. Then Tails communicates with Sonic with the device, and he sees him as a hologram. Tails says he went too fast and went out of phase with his plane. His communication gets interrupted, and Eggman ambushes the village with his Eggmobile shooting lasers and sending robots at the heroes. Amy tells Knuckles to protect Tails so they can focus on saving Sonic. I love seeing Six fire an arrow at a part of the Eggmobile. It takes advantage of her wild personness for once. Sure, it was painfully pointless, but this should happen way more often. It's like Fleetway Amy. What's the excuse for this being so rare? It makes just as much sense for her to use a bow and arrow. Tails uses his device to return Sonic to normal, and this somehow leads to him running super fast like Sonic. and he asks Sonic how he can keep his lunch down like this, when normally Tails is fast too. Like when he flies in SDC, or Sonic Adventures. But somehow Sonic just says it's a secret instead of saying that's one of his required superpowers. That's dumb. You shouldn't address and lampshade a common plot hole if you're not gonna bother filling it, in even the most basic obvious way. And he and Tails run around fast to save the day, and all of a sudden now he's not nauseous from it. Sonic breaks some stuff, and Tails just now gets nauseous and has to sit on a bench. The heroes keep breaking robots as kinda inspiring music plays, and I really have to wonder why Tails is nauseous from speed when that's out of character. Sonic puts his arm around Tails and calls him his best friend, and it was also surprisingly sweet how Knuckles responded to that. He proved that he wanted Sonic to think of him as his best friend, and put his hand on his head. It's out of character for most Knuckles, but this is Boom Knuckles. At least his design being different reflects his different personality, even if they went way overboard. I hate that the story ends with Tails not being fast enough to keep up with them and being nauseous about speed. That's never been Tails. Has the writer never even played one of the classic games? Tails ran through loop-de-loops too, Tails Spin Dash too, and we never saw him get nauseous. He's Tails, not Easy Eddie. He's supposed to be spinning his tails behind him when he runs to propel himself ahead almost as fast as Sonic. In the games, he started being friends with Sonic so easily, specifically because he was the first one to keep up with him. Having Tails be like this is so out of touch of the writer. In SDC, we even saw a civilian say that he was always a fast one, after he asked how he could have made out of a house and gotten to him that fast. And in the Sonic X comic, we see him moving in a yellow blur as he flies around a giant machine to destroy it. But now he's nauseous from speed, because the writer's writing him as himself instead of as Tails. And of course he, the writer, would be nauseous from that kind of speed. And Tails is the nerd character in the show, so we have to make him a wuss. It's using every other show logic instead of Sonic logic. Amy's badass compared to him in the show because she's always hitting robots with her hammer and looking brave. But when's the last time I noticed Tails doing any fighting? This episode starts out with Tails betraying Sonic by getting him hurt over and over in callous experiments with his super speed. Comedic sociopathy makes sense for neutral characters like the protagonist of Family Guy. It really doesn't work for, first of all, Sonic characters, and second, for characters who across the franchise are supposed to be heroes, people you have to look up to. I'm not looking up to Tails here. I'm seeing him as an unhinged mad scientist. Sonic got some broken ribs, and has bandages all over, and he's still smiling and wants to do experiments with him. What's wrong with him? This isn't the sweet, naive kid I know. What Tails is like this? It would have worked if they explained that he got replaced by an evil twin. At least Uncle Chuck's speed experiments didn't hurt Sonic. But I do like that it's making him curious about science and acting like an actual scientist for once. Of course he would have done this with Sonic. But it just makes me wonder what took him so long, and why he didn't instantly stop doing it the minute his best friend got hurt. He would have felt awful and apologized, and spent a while making it up to him. That's why I like Tails. This isn't Tails, this is Eggman in a Tails costume. You'd think he would have done these experiments when he first met Sonic. But this isn't a flashback episode. Anyways, the episode does finally get good when Sonic actually enjoys being speedy for the first time in the show. For once, acting exactly how I'd expect Sonic to act. And after he knocks himself out, so that solves the intriguing mystery with that at the start of the episode, we find out that Sonic's trapped in his own speed, just like in Sonic the comic. But that comic portrayed it a lot better, ironically enough. Sonic looked at a digital clock to see it change a little, and just grabbing a newspaper shredded it to pieces. Here, the only real result of his speed is that he was invisible to everybody, and he threw Eggman's stuff around, making him think his base had a ghost, and making Sonic look like a thug. It entertained me seeing him casually break into Eggman's house and throw his things around, even if Eggman wasn't doing anything wrong, so he seemed like the victim, which is all kinds of wrong. I shouldn't be feeling sorry for Eggman, but he just looks so harmless in the show when he's scared. Thank God Sonic didn't get the police called on him and arrested for bothering Eggman. You'd think Eggman would try it, but that would ruin the episode. I thought the plot would linger more on him thinking he has a ghost in his house. But instead, Eggman ambushes the village because Sonic's not there, and Tails uses his device to become fast enough to be on Sonic's level. And that gets Sonic out of his speed with his device. Well, that is a natural way to resolve the conflict, But Sonic calming himself down by boring himself with the Train Spotter's website worked just as well. And it made a lot more sense, because if Sonic's in control of his own speed, why shouldn't he be able to return to normal himself? But the thing is that the machine on him got stuck. But if it's stuck at high speed and it's forcing it on him despite his entire magical power being control over speed, why wasn't his first instinct to just destroy it? I mean, he hated how it made him look when he woke up. He would have destroyed it. And logically, that would have resolved the conflict too, and much faster, but then we wouldn't have had much of a plot. I totally get why Sonic wanted to be careful and not destroy the device he was wearing, because for all he knew, that would trap him like that, and he did need it to get back to normal. But I don't see why Sonic isn't always as fast as he's portrayed here. His name is Sonic. Why is boosting new to him? He's boosted since Sad AM! Remember the rings boosting him? This was a story that unintentionally ripped off another one of the series. But it was worth it because it's portrayed in a completely new way and did a much better job justifying how he got into this situation, as opposed to, he ran too fast to save a town, when last time he did that he was fine. I just wish he did a better job showing the consequences, because SDC showed us a much better variety of what it was like for Sonic to be stuck at high speed, with everything around him in slow motion. It was way more interesting to see him shred a newspaper just by touching it. Sonic could throw stuff around in Eggman's base too fast for him to see him anytime. He doesn't need to be too fast to do this. And creating actor images of himself, he should be able to do that naturally. He did in Archie, even if I thought it was stupid. Sure, Sonic's slower in Rise of Lyric, but I'm pretty sure in all the other Boom games he's as fast as ever, because they actually have fast level design, and only Shattered Crystal got a sequel. But apparently he's the slowest Sonic in canon, but his name is still Sonic. It was an interesting episode. I just can't get over how infuriating Amy and Tails were being. They wouldn't enjoy abusing him like this. He ditched them. This isn't Family Guy. Why do they think comedic sociopathy is a good fit for Sonic? I've heard this is a pretty mean-spirited show. It's bad enough Knuckles gets mistreated in the games, but it's actually even more shocking when it's Sonic. I'd prefer for Knuckles to be mistreated in this show. If they aren't looking up to him as the biggest hero of their team, then who are they? Who is he? Even Sonic X got this right. Sure, they're all usually equally competent in the action scene. They each destroy Robot 101, so it makes sense that he wouldn't be put on a higher pedestal than the rest of them, because he's not super in focus. This is the only continuity that doesn't glorify Sonic as the overpowered main character while shunting his friends to the side in the competence department. But that doesn't make their utter heartlessness to him make sense. We're supposed to believe Tails is his best friend, but how could he call him that after everything he put him through? How could Amy not actually be scared for his well-being when he got slammed into a stone wall? This actually made me forget the fact that apparently she does have a crush on him in Sonic Boom, because she sure as hell hasn't been acting like she loves him. The Amy I know would be horrified and insist on nursing him back to health, bringing out of her the good in her and showing a kind of positive side effect of her crush on Sonic. Instead, she came off less like a friend and more like an enemy he was forced to be around. Why was he even using her skates instead of having his own anyways? Oh right, because skating is a girl thing. So only she has the skates because she's the girl. What a model female role model. How progressive. Every girl wants to be like Amy Rose, right? Look at how admirable she's being by being a complete sociopath. The fact that she acted upset at first made her totally selfish reaction afterwards even worse because it reminded me of how she'd be if she was in character, acting natural. This is ridiculously bitchy even by Boom Amy standards. But this is unbelievably out of character for Tails. Sonic getting injured even once because of him would be the last straw for both of them. It's probably the joke, but that's not a good joke. Making characters we're supposed to like horrible jerks isn't funny, it's infuriating. Particularly when they're supposed to be outright good guys, heroes. And it's their own friends they're doing awful things to. Didn't we already get enough of characters in Sonic being annoying and making us want to punch them? That's why the Sonic shitty friends meme got started, isn't it? I tend to laugh at dark humor, but this went way too far. Sonic is the last person that his friends would be getting hurt without caring. It makes sense if it was Eggman and he had given himself Sonic speed. I couldn't even imagine them doing that to Knuckles in most of the series because they'd be scared of his temper. They'd know he'd want to beat them up for it. And the same goes for Amy, and they'd be way too attached to Tails. Sonic is the main hero, the main character, the one that all of them except Knuckles really admire. And except Amy. I keep forgetting how out of character she is in the show. And he is not enough of a doormat pushover to agree to subject himself to abuse like this. Alright, he agrees to be the subject of slapstick all the time in the show. Again, they're so out of character that I forget about it. When he called out his friends, he should have been angrier about it, not just calmly bitter and sarcastic. I was proud of him finding it cathartic when he lampshaded their behavior, only to be annoyed when he eagerly went on to make the same mistake again, when he's not supposed to be an idiot. He's normally smart in this show. Here he's a complete pushover who would do anything his friend said when he's supposed to be cool. And you think if anything, Tails would be the pushover. And Boom Knuckles would be the only one who would get subjected to abuse and lack of empathy. Normally he's the butt monkey in the show, and for very good reason. But even then, it'd still be out of character for so-called heroes to not care about a friend of theirs getting hurt, even if it was Knuckles. Granted, Sonic and Knuckles did laugh at a guy when he was hit in the head with a horseshoe like psychopathic monsters all of a sudden, when Sonic was really concerned about him before. But it wasn't Knuckles here, it was Amy and Tails. And I'm used to Amy being rude, that's normal. But Tails is supposed to be the nicest one of them all. Being sweet and humble is literally part of his official character description. He's the one person in Sonic's group where it'd be unacceptable for him to be a jerk. And he's not even properly called out on it. You think Amy would be furious with him, protective of Sonic. I'd love if we saw Eggman taunt him that experimenting on Sonic sounds like something he'd do. And then Tails could feel terrible about crossing the line and apologize to him and buy him a chili dog and stuff. This has been like a bad fanfiction. But even in fanfiction, I've never seen them this out of character. Most of the time, fanfiction gets the characters right, better than the games do now. Or at least the fanfictions that get the spelling and grammar right in the summaries, which are the only ones I read. This harmful experimenting is at least fascinating because it's reminding us that there's a thin line between Tails and Eggman in the Mad Scientist department, and Tails would cross it if he wasn't a good person. But somehow he doesn't notice he's doing anything wrong. How could he think the science was worth it at that point? In all seriousness, really crossing the line would be if Tails ambushed the village with robots. That's the only difference between him and Eggman at this point. He's too polite to actually threaten the village, but he'll break Sonic's ribs no problem. His inventions still cause the heroes trouble, way more trouble than Eggman's pathetic robots ever did, because they're killed in the span of one little scene. But Tails' inventions are the plot of entire episodes. He also shows arrogance about his inventions because he brags about them to his friends, just like Eggman would. Although he at least talks about them in a cheerful, excited kid way instead of actually being smug. So it's harmless. He's way better in the show than most of the franchise. I just wish he'd actually do something most of the time instead of just standing around and talking, with his character being wasted. He and Eggman are what get me excited about watching the show, because I want to see what kind of adventures they'll get into. I want to see what they're gonna do in the show, not Knuckles. And Tails was way more useful and active in the show where he got kidnapped a dozen times. I doubt Tails did like 50 useful things in this show. All I can remember is he fought robots. I can vaguely remember him throwing stuff at them really early on, but usually I only remember Amy, Sonic, and Knuckles fighting. All his inventions backfire on the heroes. It's actually a shockingly common plot point, to the point where it pushes the times his inventions didn't screw up out of your mind. Episode 3, this one, episode 50, episode 47, to the point where I can't remember any of his inventions besides the biplane being helpful. He's pretty determined to have not taken the hint and quit for their own protection. Well, he's just a kid. He's not mature enough to be selfless and give up his hobby. But still, he's supposed to be humble, not stupidly insistent on risking stuff going wrong just for the sake of his hobby. It's actually pretty insulting to Tails' character. That's worse than Sad AM Rotor. At least he wasn't an outright screw-up. He just took forever to make bombs and didn't give all his friends ray guns. Which also applies to Tails, but at least here they don't need them because of how weak the robots are. In Sad AM they were almost invincible, but here they all die in one hit like they're made of paper. Even Tails gets the shaft in this show. But I was willing to forgive it because he's not just there to be read bedtime stories to like Sad AM. He's not constantly getting kidnapped or otherwise humiliated. And above that rock bottom standard, what's really impressive is that he's usually portrayed as nice, naive, and likable. And not incredibly boring Mr. Exposition like in the games and Sonic X and Archie, where I couldn't be less interested in him. But here he doesn't even get being nice right. Even Pontac and Graf didn't make Tails a sociopath who smiled at Sonic's broken ribs. And the rest of his friends are no better, because they didn't express pity for Sonic either, or tell him to stop.